Hello and welcome to this discussion on Humankind's open beta early modern era wonders. We're going to be taking a look at the 4 wonders of the early modern era in the 4th part of this 5-part series. We're not going to be looking at any final ratings for wonders or anything like that quite yet, since I don't feel I've had enough experience to really rate them, but we will talk about some of the different synergies and combinations that we have with these wonders and the best way to make effective use of them. As a bit of an aside, I apologize for the delay in getting this video up. I had to do some unexpected travel, and I had actually ordered a new microphone that I was waiting on, but never showed up, so I put off recording this, but I still don't have the new microphone, so hopefully I'll have that soon. At any rate, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about the unique effects of the wonders. And this is going to include the immediate effects, so how useful is the wonder right now, as well as the scaling effects, which is how useful is the wonder going to be as the game goes on. We'll talk about affinity and playstyle synergies, and I'll detail some of the better affinity synergies, but there are still going to be uses outside of the specific ones that I mentioned. We'll talk about cultural synergies, and this is going to be more specific to individual cultures. Some cultures will synergize better with specific wonders than others. And finally, we'll talk about combinations with other wonders. All of these are non-exhaustive. They're not meant to be recommendations to build these things in every single one of these situations that you encounter, or meant to dissuade you from building them in other situations in which they might be useful. Additionally, all the wonders provide plus 20 stability and plus 100 fame, so we're not going to talk about that unless it synergizes with some other aspect of the wonder. And finally, we'll be using these symbols for the different playstyles and affinities. You'll note that the religious affinity is not actually an affinity in the game, but I felt that it was worth mentioning simply because it is a viable playstyle that you can pursue. Additionally, these affinities aren't really meant to describe you playing that specific affinity necessarily. So, while the Harappans are agrarian and they're focused on growth and they're going to have that growth-focused agrarian playstyle, you can also achieve that with the Franks, for instance, with their plus 50% food on cities. So these playstyle affinities are really more meant to describe the style of play that you're pursuing, rather than necessarily the specific affinity that you have in any given era. So that out of the way, let's talk about our very first early modern era wonder, which is Machu Picchu. And Machu Picchu is a little bit deceptive. The effect of Machu Picchu reads, it redistributes 50% of the food from the city that has Machu Picchu to all cities. When you're reading this, what you would think it means is that if a city is producing 200 food and you build a Machu Picchu there, it will evenly distribute 100 food from that city to all the other cities. Instead, what it actually does is it gives all your other cities 100 food. And this difference is enormous. It makes a huge difference in how viable Machu Picchu is. Because every city is getting 50% of the food of the one city. This is incredible. Machu Picchu is a really good wonder, and we'll talk a bit about why. But first, affinities. It works really well with a lot of different styles, but honestly, the best playstyle for Machu Picchu is the expansionists and militarists, because every city that you own is always going to be getting the maximum number of food, regardless of the number of cities that you have. So you can get tons and tons and tons of cities, and it doesn't really matter what their level of development is all that much, because as soon as you take control of them, you suddenly get this massive explosion to the amount of food that you have, and they're going to grow extremely rapidly. So you place Machu Picchu down in a single city that has a ton of growth. Perhaps you've specialized this one city a bit at the expense of some of the other outputs, but that's okay because its singular purpose is to have Machu Picchu to grow all your other cities. So you have this one city down, and you go out and you conquer a bunch of other cities, and suddenly all these other cities are rapidly catching up in the number of pops that they have, that you can then assign to different jobs for production or science or gold, whatever. Similarly, with the builders, you tend to focus a bit more on production and putting out all those districts that are related to production and your emblematic quarters and all that kind of stuff. Machu Picchu allows you to enable that sort of play even farther to really specialize in becoming a production powerhouse, because you can use the benefits of your culture to get a city just online enough that it can efficiently get out agriculture quarters, and then you just build a ton of agriculture quarters, right? You can even spend an era perhaps using the builder ability in order to convert your other yields into production to help you get agriculture quarters out faster. And then when the pre-modern era rolls around and you get Machu Picchu, you place it down, and suddenly you pretty much don't have to worry about food ever again, right? So all your other cities can just keep growing and growing and growing, and that one city that you own is supporting everything else. You would think that Machu Picchu has a synergy with agrarians, and to some extent, this is correct. I think with agrarians, it seems obvious, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I think where it works well with agrarians is if you've gone for that agrarian sort of play style in a single era to help boost your food. But it's kind of redundant if you've primarily focused on growth, because you're going to get diminishing returns on the amount of food that you have on your cities. So it can help you get that one city up that you want to redistribute food to other people. But if you have, say, nematins in a bunch of your cities, or you have a bunch of Three Sisters plantations, or whatever it is, the redistributed food from Machu Picchu isn't worth as much, because food is worth more the less population that you have. So agrarians, there's a little bit there if you pick it in like one era to support that food production in the one city, but I honestly wouldn't necessarily recommend Machu Picchu over some of the other wonders if you're really focused on a growth play style. Rather, Machu Picchu is going to help you catch up on your growth if you're playing a play style that isn't already focused on it. So, some cultures that work well. First is the Khmer. And the Khmer, although an era earlier, they have a lot of stuff that works really well with Machu Picchu. Specifically the beret, because the beret is going to give you food that you can redistribute to your other cities based on the number of districts that you have in your city. So you plop these down both in the cities that aren't going to have Machu Picchu and in the city that will have Machu Picchu. And the beret is going to give that city production per population. So you're able to support building more agrarian quarters. But because you have this in other cities as well, and you're getting production per population, when you get Machu Picchu online and your growth explodes in all of your other cities, it means they're all benefiting from additional production as they grow. Now the Franks, I know I just trashed the agrarians a little bit here, but with the Franks specifically, if you pick only the Franks and you don't really worry about the other agrarians and you get Machu Picchu, the Franks have this incredible bonus where they get plus 50% food on all their cities. So you're going to have a lot of food to redistribute with Machu Picchu if you pick the Franks. Your cities will grow like absolute crazy. Now, the devs have, I believe, stated that they intend to change the Franks legacy trait for release, so we'll see how that actually plays out. But as it was in the open beta with the plus 50% food on the cities, crazy synergy with Machu Picchu. The Mexicans are in a bit of a similar state as well. They just get a plus 20% flat food. Very similar sort of bonus to the Franks, but a little bit less good than their bonus. I put the Ottomans here to represent sort of the militarists and expansionists, but really most cultures that are good at expanding can fit just as well in here. The Ottomans, though, in particular, are probably the most competent expansionists. of the early modern era that can make the most use out of this, but you can effectively make use out of this with any expansionist or militarist or any culture that has a good unit that is able to expand very rapidly. So really the general strategy on this, you build one city and it has a ton of growth and you give it to all your other cities. But you have to be really, really careful with Machu Picchu. And I think this is going to affect its viability in multiplayer as well. Because when you use Machu Picchu, you really can't afford to lose the city with the wonder in it, because it's going to be supporting such a huge number of population. So, unlike other wonders, where it is going to hurt to lose those wonders, Machu Picchu can ruin your entire game if you lose it, if you're relying on it to support your other cities. So Machu Picchu needs to be built in a city that you are 100% sure that you can defend. If you are losing the game or other players are very aggressive against you, you have a really long border with a bunch of other players that are all pincering you, that sort of thing, Machu Picchu might be too risky for you to actually build. So Machu Picchu's good is if you have core territory with low threat. If you are subject to lots of invasions, potentially losing cities, all that kind of stuff, think twice before you build Machu Picchu. And I think, like I said, that is going to be doubly true in multiplayer. This will be a very hit or miss wonder when it comes to people playing against each other. Whereas AI, once you get to this point in the game, at least what we've seen so far in the open betas, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to lose your cities by the postmodern. So what are some of the wonder synergies? Perhaps the most obvious one is Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is a holy site, and it's going to give you +1 food per faith. So you can get your Angkor Wat down in the city with Machu Picchu, bunch more food to redistribute. Very obvious. Stonehenge is a bit of a similar one. It gets some food based on the number of co-religion estates. It's not a ton, but there is a light synergy there. The pyramids are also a good one, interestingly, because when you're building Machu Picchu, that means that you are likely going to be committing to this sort of high, broad growth across a lot of cities. What you want then in those cities is to produce a lot of quarters in order to provide your population with jobs so that they can produce outputs. So the pyramids give you that 25% discount on all your quarters. So you can take all your cities that are benefiting from the food and you can build up a bunch more districts. You can build, makers' quarters, you can build market quarters, you can build emblematic quarters, whatever. But additionally, it'll also help your main city with Machu Picchu actually continue to build agriculture quarters that it can then redistribute the food from to its other cities. Finally, and a little less obviously, is going to be Forbidden City. So Machu Picchu is more effective the more cities that you have. The best way to get more cities at this point in the game is to go to war. And Forbidden City gives you extra war support every single time you hit that declare war button. So when you build Forbidden City and you have Machu Picchu, you are effectively committing to this hyper-expansionist sort of playstyle, where you go out, you murder your opponents, you take their cities, and then you keep growing those cities to even bigger and bigger levels. So Machu Picchu overall, really good wonder. It gives you a lot of food, can really help support an entire empire, but a little bit dangerous if in the wrong circumstance. So next we have St. Basil's Cathedral. St. Basil's Cathedral is another holy site wonder, and it gives you +1 faith per district. This is a somewhat familiar site at this point. In the previous era, the Teutons, the Kaiserdom, they get +1 faith per district with their emblematic quarter there, and I believe the Spanish with the Cathedral Gothica get +1 faith per district on their emblematic quarter as well. Of course, none of those emblematic quarters act as a holy site, so St. Basil's Cathedral will get the benefits of all the tenets that affect holy sites from the religion that you've chosen. Overall, it's decent. I think the +1 faith per district is still okay, but it's kind of lessened by the fact that, you can get that same impact for a lot cheaper by just picking a couple of the particular cultures, namely the Ottomans and Spanish. I do think it's okay if you are sort of defending against those cultures as well, because they're going to have a high faith output, and you want to protect your faith from being overtaken. But really, the draw of this is kind of the holy site. If you're focusing on that holy site strategy, then St. Basil's Cathedral is really your only option in this era. And obviously, the affinities for this are going to be religious and builders, right? So more districts is going to give you more faith. That's the long and short of it. And again, with the holy site strategy with religions, St. Basil's Cathedral, your only option. So if you are going very heavy into that religion playstyle with a lot of holy site-based tenets, St. Basil's Cathedral is probably the one you're going to pick. So a few cultures that work really well with this. The Teutons from the previous era. The Teutons are almost certainly going to be the most advanced faith culture by the time the early modern rolls around because of the Kaiserdom. So St. Basil's Cathedral is simply going to allow you to continue to snowball your faith advantage and spread your religion. And as you expand and integrate more people into your empire, it also means that because of the Teuton's legacy trait, you're going to be generating more science and more money. The Mughals are simply here as a builder. Really, it isn't anything super unique to them, but just because of the amount of production that they can provide, they can build a lot of districts really, really fast. And that means you're going to be generating more faith. And the Jama Masjid, while it's mostly production, it does provide a +5 faith flat as well, which isn't amazing, but it's okay. So the Jama Masjid is a decent quarter at supporting the faith-based game, even if it's not the same as, the Sultan Kami or the Cathedral Gothica from the Spanish. But it does provide a little bit of faith, and having more districts than probably any other culture in the game at this point is going to give you that extra faith as well. Obviously, the Ottomans and the Spanish, if you really want to double down on your faith game for whatever reason, St. Basil's Cathedral, great option. If you've picked these, you likely have a strong faith anyway, and you want to get more holy sites to get more benefits out of them. There is the point that perhaps you may be hitting the point that you are no longer getting any real benefit from this because you have so much faith output anyway. It's likely going to depend on what religious tenets you've chosen. If you've chosen a lot of things that don't benefit holy sites, you might ignore St. Basil's Cathedral in favor of something else, like Machu Picchu, for instance, or even just saving up your influence to grab a wonder in the next era. Should also mention that stability cultures are pretty good with this, so things like the Italians and Austro-Hungarians that have a high amount of stability allows them to support a lot more districts, which means you're going to get more value out of St. Basil's Cathedral as the game goes on. And then the Turks in the contemporary era, who basically never have to worry about stability ever. So they can just keep building their cities and building their cities and building their cities, and then generating more faith with St. Basil's. So really, there's not much to explain here. This is pretty straightforward. You build more districts, your religion gets stronger, it acts as a holy site, so you get some stability benefits. That's about it. So what does this work well with? First is the Angkor Wat. And like I mentioned before, the Angkor Wat is going to provide you food for the amount of faith that you have, and St. Basil's Cathedral can generate a lot of faith. So by generating more faith, you are going to be getting more food, which is going to allow you to grow your cities. The other one is the pyramids. And the pyramids allow you to produce districts more quickly by giving you that discount on all your districts. So obvious synergy there because it allows you to get that +1 faith per district more quickly. And finally, like all the other holy sites, it works well with other holy site wonders. So you build St. Basil's, and perhaps you have Notre Dame, and perhaps you have Statue of Zeus, and perhaps you have Temple of Artemis. Every single one of these holy sites that you get, you're getting a bunch of stability, you're getting a bunch of flat faith, you're also getting some other benefits, and you're getting the tenets on that affect holy sites on every single one of those wonders. So it makes for a pretty good combination if you can get a bunch of these. But if St. Basil's Cathedral is going to be your only one, there may be other wonders that you want to build instead. So overall, St. Basil's Cathedral, good for a faith game. It does come in a little bit late at a time when there are other faith generation options available, but if you're really pursuing that holy site strategy, it's a decent pick. So let's talk about the Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal provides plus 50% money on reliable city, which is cities that have over 90% stability. Unfortunately, this is something that I didn't get to test in the beta because the AI had always claimed this wonder by the time I was even able to look at the Taj Mahal. What is unclear to me about the wording of the Taj Mahal is if the plus 50% money is on all of your cities empire-wide, or if it is on a specific city, the one that you build it in. Obviously, it's way better if it's empire-wide. I do think it is probably still worth building, even if it's only a particular city in some circumstances. So let's get that out of the way. So the obvious playstyle synergy here is with people that generate a lot of money. And honestly, there are way too many of those to list. So everyone that can make fat stacks of coin and people that can get a lot of stability are really good. This can be the Byzantines, the Axumites, the Dutch, the Zhou, anyone, the Austro-Hungarians, the Italians. All of these have ways to generate gold and ensure that their stability on all their cities remains really high. Because in order to get that plus 50% money, you need to have 90% stability or better. I would also like to mention specifically in the contemporary era, the Indians and the Turks, because the Indians are going to get massive modifiers based on the number of territories in their sphere of influence to their gold generation, and the Taj Mahal can really snowball that. Meanwhile, the Turks get just a flat plus 10 stability on all their districts. So they basically never have to worry about districts and stability. So you're always going to be getting the modifier. Of course, the Turks, you probably want to have built up a good money infrastructure before you enter the contemporary era. But again, the Taj Mahal, it just works so well with so many different cultures, literally almost every single merchant culture throughout the entire game, and all the ones that focus on stability. So as long as you can maintain that stability, you'll generate a ton of money, and you can use money to do almost anything, really. So money can be used to support your war effort or build up your infrastructure, whatever it is you need. It's very versatile as a resource, and the Taj Mahal is going to let you get way more of it. I'd say probably the best merchant affinity that works well with this is the Dutch, because the Dutch really are unrivaled in their ability to generate coin based on anything else that we've seen so far. If the Taj Mahal is specific to one city rather than being empire-wide, the British are also a good option in the industrial era. So you build the Taj Mahal in your capital, and then the British are going to provide you a bunch of modifiers to your science and your money on your capital as well. So a lot of possible combinations, a lot to keep in mind. There are going to probably be a lot of games that you play in which Taj Mahal is worth building, but it's not going to be every single game. It'll depend on the strategy that you've pursued. So a couple wonder synergies is going to be first the Statue of Zeus. So the Statue of Zeus, as a holy site wonder, first and foremost, is going to provide you some extra stability, and perhaps you even have some tenets that from your religion that give you more stability as well. And this is going to additionally give you extra money, a percentage modifier to your money based on the number of alliances that you have, plus 10% money per alliance. So every single alliance that you have, you're generating even more money on top of the Taj Mahal's modifier. Additionally, if you've taken that route in the medieval era, you can also stack this with the Byzantines, who get plus 5% money per alliance. So you can get these really massive modifiers to the amount of money that you're generating by stacking some of these benefits. Additionally, the Statue of Liberty gives you plus 1% science and 1% money per territory under your sphere of influence. So if you are a very culturally influential culture, then you can build the Statue of Liberty and get a massive money modifier as well. And if you're culturally influential, you're also likely to have several alliances with other people. It makes it a little bit easier. So it's a good synergy if you've managed to nab all of these wonders throughout the game. So this one isn't quite as strong, but I'd also like to plug Stonehenge as well, simply because it provides you with a ton of stability. So you get that plus 20 flat, plus 20 from being a holy site, and you generate some additional stability based on the number of co-religionist states. So if you have a really strong faith and a lot of your neighbors have adopted your religion, then Stonehenge can provide you with the stability you need to ensure that you're getting that plus 50% money modifier on one of your cities. So the Taj Mahal, overall, you can generate a lot of money using this. Its viability is going to vary from game to game, and just how good it is really depends on how that specific wording plays out, depending on whether it applies to a single city or multiple cities. I suspect it is the latter based on what we've seen in the other wonders, but that's something that we'll have to test once the actual game comes out. So finally, let's talk about Topkapi Palace. This wonder is in an odd place in my opinion. So it gives a flat plus 5% industry, and then it gives you plus 100% industry towards any shared project. So that's going to include holy sites, wonders, and national projects, which are going to be things that come in at the contemporary era, and that's going to be things like the moon landing, or it's going to be things like a nuclear program, that sort of stuff. From what we have seen so far in Humankind, this seems like it would mostly benefit builders. But builders have an issue because they're not reliably able to claim wonders. They don't have the influence generation in order to do that. So in the rare situation that they can claim a wonder, that they beat the aesthetes and other influential cultures to claiming one of these wonders, the builders want to claim wonders that are going to give them some kind of good benefit to their overall game. The Topkapi Palace, although it provides that industry bonus, the cultural wonders are not something you're going to reliably be able to claim, so you're losing that effect. And furthermore, the builders are going to have so much production already that they can really build wonders faster than anyone else. The value of that extra production isn't as high necessarily. You do get a little bit of bonus to your industry. It's not that much. I think where I'm struggling is that we don't know how influential the national projects are going to be. So things like nukes or how much fame you're going to get from landing on the moon. If those are really difficult projects to accomplish that require obscene levels of production, then the Topkapi Palace is going to be pretty good for the people that want to pursue those objectives. But I don't think they're going to be based on what we've seen so far. But that's just speculation. So really, what I think this is actually good for are the aesthetes, because the aesthetes are really well positioned to claim wonders because they have the influence generation. But they lack the production to effectively build a lot of wonders. So what the aesthetes can do is they can get into an era, you can probably claim a wonder immediately. You're going to be sitting on enough influence to do it. You build the Topkapi Palace, and then you use the Topkapi Palace to really churn out all the wonders and projects that you need. So you're going to be paying this massive opportunity cost as someone like the Edo Japanese or the Ming in order to get these wonders online with your production because it costs you so many turns in order to build them. So the Topkapi Palace allows you to not necessarily have focused your production, but still kind of hoard wonders because you can actually get them online earlier, which allows you to then claim more wonders faster. So really, the Topkapi Palace is more built for aesthetes because the builders don't suffer quite as much from that opportunity cost because they can turn all their cities that are production focused towards building the wonder and actually get it online relatively quickly, whereas aesthetes are really trying to claim as many wonders as they can, but don't have an effective means to produce them. So what this means is that the cultures that work best with the Topkapi Palace are things like the Ming and the Edo Japanese, cultures that generate a lot of influence so that they can get all the wonders that they possibly can. In the following era, in the industrial, you also have the Italians and the Austro-Hungarians who provide some major influence as well. I do think that the Ming and the Edo Japanese are probably the cultures to mention here, but the Italians and the Austro-Hungarians are relevant. It's just that as you get later in the game, there are fewer and fewer wonders to claim, and it's kind of an issue I have with the palace overall, is that by the time you get to the postmodern era and you've claimed this wonder, there aren't going to be a lot of eras left in the game, and there aren't a lot of wonders left to claim. So again, a lot of it really comes back to how valuable are the shared projects going to be in the contemporary era, the national projects. And the Topkapi Palace does have some natural synergy with the Persians, because the Persians get a discount to shared projects. Again, though, we don't know how valuable it is in the contemporary, and we don't even know anything about the wonders in the contemporary era either. So the Persians are in an odd spot themselves because their benefit is only minus 25% production costs on those shared projects. So it does have a synergy with Topkapi Palace, but if I could choose their legacy trait or having the Topkapi Palace, I'd rather just have the palace. And the Persians don't provide you any benefits to actually getting influence. So you're not going to be claiming wonders as the Persians, really. So you're really investing in this idea that these national projects that you get later are really, really valuable. And we don't know if they are yet. I hope that maybe they might be worth considering, but it remains to be seen. So really, only build this thing if you are going to be building a lot of wonders and doing all the national projects in the contemporary era. The final value of this, as I've mentioned numerous times already, really, really depends on those last projects. And if those last projects are obscenely expensive, I would say that this will work with builders as well, because it actually makes the wonder being the wonder worth claiming for you, sacrificing all the other wonders that you could possibly claim. But as it stands, I would rate the Topkapi Palace as probably the worst wonder in the era. So let's talk about the synergy really quick, and I say the synergy because really the only thing this works well with is the Eiffel Tower, which I also have some issues with, but we'll talk about that in the next video, because the Eiffel Tower is going to give you +1 production per population. So obviously if you are having more production in your city, you're able to build wonders faster. I only would call it a loose synergy, though, because by the time you get the Eiffel Tower online, you're really only looking at a few remaining wonders in the final era and a few national projects. So that plus 100% modifier you're getting from Topkapi Palace on top of the bonus production you're getting from Eiffel Tower is really only relevant a small portion of the time to only a few of the things that you'll actually be producing. So it's I would call loose synergy, but really Topkapi Palace doesn't have a strong synergy with any other wonder that we've seen so far. So that wraps up this discussion on Humankind's early modern era wonders. Let me know what you thought about this discussion in the comments below. If you thought I missed a synergy with a particular culture and wonder, or multiple wonders with each other, if you thought I was over or undervaluing any of the wonders' effects, or anything else that came to mind as you heard me talk about those wonders. I'll be coming back soon with the final video of the series on the industrial era wonders that we saw in the closed beta. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.